fellow travelers along the path of the beam. I am known on this level of the tower as Jaime and Fuego, and if it please you, join me here for a bit of palaver on Hail to Stephen King. That's right, y'all. You can just call me Fuego for short, and I cordially welcome you to the horror show, where I do this program every terrifying Tuesday and spooktacular Saturday. We're at over 160 episodes now on Hail to Stephen King, nearly 3 years running, and it has been a pleasure and an honor if you are new to the proceedings, or if you have been with me for many long days and pleasant nights. So stoked to have you here. And you know, an on and off series that I have been doing has been a specific look at a few Stephen King short stories that have never been properly collected in any of his big releases, which my personal favorites being Night Shift, Just After Sunset, Bizarre Bad Dreams, but obviously there's great stuff in Skeleton Crew, Everything's Eventual, Nightmares and Dreamscapes. I mean, you'll find gems in all of his short story collections, but for whatever reason, there's a couple that have not been like actually, you know, put together, and these are ones that have either appeared in strange anthologies that just had various authors and he was one of them featured, or in this case they were printed in a magazine or a, you know, I don't know, a newspaper or something of that nature. And so ones that I have done before already is The Night of the Tiger, I believe, or The Night of the Tigers plural, I can't remember. It's like a strange story about this tiger trainer and the circus and stuff. That one was interesting. The Reploids, I believe, is another one that deals with alternate dimensional stuff and ending up on a different version of the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, and that one's crazy. And then I also recently did Squad D, which was a Vietnam-leaning story. It was just recently collected in the newest Shivers collection, Shivers 8, I believe it is, by Cemetery Dance. But this is one that is honestly near and dear to my heart, and it's probably of the Uncollecteds my personal favorite. And that personal favorite is called the Blue Air Compressor. And just to give a little bit of context, this is one of my rare Stephen King items. This is the July 1981 edition of Heavy Metal, the adult illustrated fantasy magazine. And many of you are probably familiar with Heavy Metal specifically because of the animated film that came out in the early 80s and had all of these badass metal bands at the time. You had Black Sabbath, you had Blue Oyster Cult. Like, it is a killer film, and it was a very adult, R-rated animated film as well. So gloriously sent up on that South Park episode, you know, the major boobage or whatever. I love it, I love it. Anytime I can reference South Park on here, you will get it. And just FYI, I'm actually putting together a special Hail to Stephen King episode that is going to be all of the times when they sent up, homaged, or in some cases spoofed Stephen King. Because so yes, look forward to that sometime soon here in the year of 19. But so the Blue Air Compressor, before being reprinted and slightly retooled by Cy King, it was originally published in January of 1971 in the Onan magazine, which was the University of Maine magazine that King had quite a few different things published in. January 71, he had just graduated the spring before, so King was not even 24 years old yet. He is fresh out of college, and he was just about to start this job teaching, and you know, still hadn't published Carrie yet or anything. He still had yet to see his big break a few years later, and so yeah, it's this story is weird, and I wish I could track down the original version, because I know with him retinkering this and stuff, it makes me wonder how much he actually retinkered. But essentially, the Blue Air Compressor, and this magazine is obviously very old. It's nearly 40 years old now, and boy, there is some I haven't seen a lot of heavy metal magazines, but it's definitely pretty adult, man, I gotta say. So there is The Blue Air Compressor, A Telling of Horror by Stephen King. And the cool thing is there's an original piece of artwork. I know I've shown this during one of my collection videos, so check that out as best you can. Yeah, so that is this Mrs. Layton, I believe her name is, and so she is the owner of this house that King describes almost similarly to the beginning of The Glass Floor, where he just gives this extensive description of this just foreboding, looming structure, you know, that in this case, this writer named, what the heck is his name again? It's like Ned, I want to say. Where the hell is Gerald? Whoops, sorry. Yeah. So you have this writer, Gerald, and he is approaching this place, and he was apparently friends with the late husband of this Mrs. Layton, and so yeah, he's coming and he's going to rent this room that she has, this like little cottage on the property, I believe it is, or it's inside the, well, anyway, she has a room for rent, basically. I just reread this earlier today, and you can tell it's a Friday, haha, because of my funny shirt that I'm wearing. But the interesting way that King structures this story is the fact that it has callbacks to the Telltale Heart. It says really early on in the tale what this guy ends up doing to this woman, and hint hint, the Blue Air Compressor has something to do with it. But yeah, all the cards are kind of laid down early on, and it's a very strangely fragmented narrative, because it really is just like basically like a paragraph chunk in one approach where it's like straight on, you know, first person narrative, and then it jumps into like this weird stream of consciousness. Like as he's approaching the home and he knocks and he gets his first sight of the woman, it goes from like straight narrative where it's like, you know, the floorboards creaked and whined, the shadow huge and unformed in the pearled glass bloomed on the fanlight, endless sound of fingers laboriously solving the riddle of chain, bolt, and hasp lock. The door opened. "Hello," the nasal voice said flatly. "You're Mr. Needley. You've rented the cottage, my husband's cottage." "Yes," Gerald said, his tongue swilling in his throat. "That's right, and you're Mrs. Layton," the nasal voice said, pleased with either his quickness or her name, though neither was remarkable. "I'm Mrs. Layton." So it goes from that to something like that. Well, no, I'll just read it for you because there's no punctuation. It just goes basically right into Gerald's like just stream of conscious thought. "This woman is so goddamn fucking big and old, she looks like, oh Jesus Christ, print dress, she must be 6'6" and fat, my God, she's fat as a hog, can't smell her white long white hair, her legs, those redwood trees in that movie, a tank, she could be a tank, she could kill me, her voice is out of any context like a kazoo, Jesus, if I laugh, I can't laugh, but she's 70, God, how does she walk in cane, her hands are bigger, that might felt like a goddamn tank, she could go through oak for Christ's sake." Yeah, no punctuation, no capitalization. It's just a boom, just a blurb of all kinds of different just jagged thoughts, like all simultaneously hitting Gerald's head at the same time. So it just basically goes back and forth between instances like that, where it's just his mind just going a million miles a minute analyzing her, just going into writer mode, I'm assuming. But then, what's even crazier is you have Stevie K, he comes and he breaks the fourth wall, like a couple paragraphs later, look who chimes in. "My name, of course, is Steve King, and you'll pardon my intrusion on your mind, or I hope you will. I could argue that the drawing aside of the curtain of presumption between reader and author is permissible because I am the writer, i.e., since it's my story, I'll do any goddamn thing I please with it. But since that leaves the reader out of it completely, that is not valid. Rule 1 for all writers is that the teller is not worth a tin tinker's fart when compared to the listener. Let us drop the matter, if we may. I am intruding for the same reason that the Pope defecates. We both have to. So there's a few instances, like, he intersperses these parts where he just jumps right in. And in some cases, he even gives, he talks about where the inspiration for the story came from. He's like, yeah, I was sitting in class one day and we were talking about Edgar Allan Poe, and the first idea for this story came to me. And so it's so meta, it's so fourth wall breaking in the fact that our Gerald guy, like, Mrs. Layton asked to see some of his stories, and he's like, yeah, sure, whatever, I'll show you some of my writing. And immediately upon first seeing her, he starts getting the idea for a story he's gonna write about her. And yet he doesn't show her that story. He basically shows her some of his other writings, like a novel he's been working on for the last year that he's just not too enthused about. He shows her some poems, a couple of essays, so on and so forth, which she critiques as if, you know, her opinion is of like the utmost esteem and importance and whatnot. And so all the while he is working on this story about her specifically that he has hidden away, and you know, just in case she goes snooping around this shizzle or whatever. And she does in fact eventually find it, and she basically laughs at him about the story and is super critical of it. And so that's about as far as I want to go. But yeah, the story jumps around and, like, you know, just like I mean, a few paragraphs in, it tells you what he does after leaving the property, because after his stay, which lasts for a few months in the fall, he ends up booking this trip overseas, and as it says at the very end of the story, yes, you know, he flew away toward Bombay, Hong Kong, and Kowloon, and so, yeah, that's where, after spending these few months in the fall here, you know, just outside of Portland, because it mentions Portland, Maine at one particular point, yeah, he ends up jutting out, but King gives some really just interesting observations about the genre. For instance, this one. Most horror stories are sexual in nature. I'm sorry to break in with this information, but I feel I must in order to make the way clear for the grisly conclusion of this piece, which is, at least psychologically, a clear metaphor for fears of sexual impotence on my part. Mrs. Layton's large mouth is symbolic of the vagina, yeah, so on. King just goes into it. I'll skip ahead a little bit. In the works of the Edgar A. Poe, Stephen King, Gerald Nately, and others who practice this particular literary form, we're apt to find locked rooms, dungeons, empty mansions, all symbols of the womb, scenes of living burial, which is sexual impotence, the dead return from the grave, necrophilia, grotesque monsters or human beings, externalized fear of the sexual act itself, torture and or murder, a viable alternative to the sexual act. These possibilities are not always valid, but the most Freud reader and writer must take them into consideration when attempting the genre. Abnormal psychology has become a part of the human experience, and it's just so fascinating how King intersperses, you know, just those just talking as himself and breaking the fourth wall and just talking about the process of writing with this very brief Telltale Heart inspired narrative, and it's just utterly fascinating to me. In fact, at one other point where he's talking about just the nature of horror, okay, any author who tells you he has never plagiarized is a liar. A good author begins with bad ideas and improbabilities and fashions them into comments on the human condition. In a horror story, it is imperative that the grotesque be elevated to the status of the abnormal. If you're an aspiring horror writer, and I kind of am myself to a degree, I've been looking at some of my old ideas once again that I've wanted to turn from skeletal structured plot points into like a full-on, you know, short-term novella. There's 3 stories in particular. I've talked about one of them here on Hail to Stephen King before, called Beneath the Rocks, but so essentially, yeah, it's one of the weirdest Stephen King stories that I've ever read, and I think maybe that's one of the reasons why he's never collected it properly, because it is just so strangely, jaggedly structured, from that crazy stream of consciousness that I mentioned near the beginning of this video, to him breaking the fourth wall and jumping in and just giving personal observations about not just writing this story in particular, but just horror writing in general. And once again, these were all observations, at least to the best of my knowledge, that he was making when he was 23 years old, but, you know, the fact that 10 years later, you know, he's 33 and, you know, comes back and is just giving a little tinkering and retooling. I know one thing, he added one thing in particular with regards to a Winchester rifle that was not in the original short story, and as I was doing just a brief little bit of research trying to find out where else this was published, the Wikipedia actually mentioned that. But I gotta say, upon reread, this, of all of the Uncollected shorts that I've read, this is my favorite. I gotta say, just because it's so weird. It's so goddamn weird. And the conclusion, it's delightfully grisly. It really, really is. And yeah, and even what happens in the aftermath is crazy too, which, you know, like I said, King basically spoils at the very beginning, which he's done that in novels before too, where you like where he'll say, that was the last time so-and-so ever talked to so-and-so, you know, because that person goes on to die. And so, yeah, I have to say, this is probably, well, I don't know if it's necessarily your cheapest and best bet. I think I got this for less than 20 bucks on eBay, but I've seen it go for quite a bit more. It was, last year, collected in something called Shining in the Dark, celebrating 20 years of Lilja's Library. And Lilja's Library is like one of the best sources for Stephen King news specifically. You know, when I get around to developing hailtostephenking.com proper here in the coming year, it's definitely something I'm going to at least use as a lot of inspiration, because it's very comprehensive and it's been going, like, I mean, since like the early days of the internet, for God's sake. And so Cemetery Dance, my beloved Cemetery Dance, I know, I kiss their butts all the time and I praise them, but with good reason, because I think they make the best Stephen King, you know, deluxe editions of things. And I can't wait for my night shift, which is going to have a couple couple uncollected stories added to that as well. Yeah, but so they put out this Shining in the Dark celebrating 20 years of Lilch's Library, and unfortunately the hardcover is already out of print. It was released last April, so that was one way to get a hold of it. I've seen it go on like eBay and Amazon for like 50, 60 bucks, but the great news is that this October 22nd to be specific, I should say, you can actually get a paperback copy of it, and besides Stephen King, it also has a story from the author of Let the Right One In. It has a Clive Barker story. It's got, I think, Bev Vincent's in it as well. Shout out to him for his work on the Road to the Dark Tower book and, you know, various other cool things with CD. And yeah, I have to say, I'm probably going to try to obtain a copy of it at some point, even though I do already have the story in this cool form with the illustration at the very beginning, just because I'm one of those King completist collectors of sorts. Yes, the Blue Air Compressor is a damn cool, very strange little story, but I cannot recommend it enough. And so, yeah, this has been another public service announcement from your constant reader and tower junkie, Mr. Fuego. And yes, I hope that you seek out this story because it is super cool, and it's one of the most interesting and, you know, odd Stephen King offerings, and I guess for that reason I can see why it hasn't been collected. But on another note, I have to double down and remind everybody that the book of the month in June for Hail to Stephen King is none other than the first Bill Hodges story, Mr. Mercedes. So at the end of June, we're going to be doing a live stream here on the Horror Show of Hail to Stephen King. That is going to be a spoilers discussion all about this first entry and just, you know, first adventure of Holly, Jerome, and Bill, you know, getting together and going after this crazy bastard Brady after, you know, the nasty incident of plowing this Mercedes-Benz through a bunch of people. And it's honestly, it's a hard-boiled crime thriller at its best. It's a fun mystery at times, and yeah, it laid the groundwork for, you know, a playground that King has continued to kind of jump back into. Next year with If It Bleeds, he's going to be jumping back to it, and also with The Outsider, and with, you know, the 3 Hodges books, also including Finders Keepers and The Watch. But yes, specifically because it is the 5-year anniversary of this book this month, that is why we are doing a reread. So if you want to be a part of that, please jump on it. I have been Jaime and Fuego, and you can find me on all social media sectors like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I have my own personal YouTube that I implore you to go and check out. It's youtube.com/Jaime and Fuego, but honestly, if you just go and search in Fuegotainment, just like you see spelled with the little logo, oh hi logo, yeah, that's where you'll find all of the different reviews. Most recently, I did the Shaft 2019 film, which Samuel L. Jackson is hilarious in, and also The Secret Life of Pets 2, where Kevin Hart is a hilarious standout in that as well. And so, yeah, that's my outlet for covering things of the non-spooktacular variety, and I'm also doing complete canon coverage of Star Wars 1 film in all of the entries every month leading up to the Episode 9 release in December, and I've also been doing some Marvel comic and novels proper as well. But obviously, you're here for the spooktacular, not just every Tuesday and Saturday with Cy King and me, but I mean, trailer reactions, film reviews, also, you know, television and comic and, you know, book reviews here, obviously, with me. We also have convention coverage. The Stephen King panel that I did all about the year of 19 is going to be debuting very soon. Super stoked to be presenting that to all of you. That was done at Phoenix Fan Fusion last month. And yeah, we're also going to be the final weekend of June at the Mad Monster Horror Convention. So I'm trying to think, today is, I want to say, well, last weekend of June, there you go, Friday through Sunday. It's in Fountain Hills, which is just outside of Phoenix, so if you have the opportunity to come and see us, we're going to have a booth, and we're also going to be helping out with a few different things, interviewing, you know, different artists, and possibly a few celebrities as well, depending on, you know, availability and whatnot. And Mad Monster put on possibly our favorite horror convention anywhere, whether it's in Charlotte or the Phoenix area. So yeah, Mad Monster Party, if you just search that, you can get all of the information. And also, I have to mention the Hail to Stephen King Facebook group, where over 500 strong, having awesome palaver constantly. I am the sole admin and moderator on there. All that I ask is that we keep it to the King clan, which also includes Joe Hill, Tabby, and Owen, obviously, but specifically Psy King. And yes, although every Friday I give kind of a Friday freak out where, you know, people have the opportunity to discuss non-King Clan things. But yes, if you want to be a part of that, please jump on there, request, and I always approve and just ask that you keep it King Clan, as I mentioned. So I guess that's going to be the end of the proceedings for today, and I shall finish off with my standard peace out. So until the Wheel of Ka comes around once more, I say hasta luego, sin amigos, and constant readers and viewers alike, but I hope that we get to have more palaver sooner rather than later. Until then, stay scared and read Stephen King. I mean, if you can track it down, Blue Air Compressor's dope!